Okay, so in this video, we're going to create a simple animation with transparent background using these two images. So I have here two PNG images. The PNG images have transparent background. Okay, so let's start. I'm going to fire up Adobe After Effects. I'm going to bring in the two images. I'm just going to close this. Okay, then I'm going to click on New Composition. If you're using an older version, go to the menu bar and then Composition, New Composition. So we have here different presets. But for now, we're going to create a very small animation that will be overlaid on an actual video. So I'm going to change this. We're going to use 512 pixels for the width and 128 pixels for the height. So it's going to be like this. Okay, so we have the timeline at the bottom. So you have the timeline. As you can see, there are numbers on this horizontal line. This represents the frames and the seconds. This pick icon, it's going to allow you to go to the different frames. This composition is 25 frames per second. So we have 25 frames to make up 1 second. So I'm going to bring in the first image. Just drag and drop from the project panel. First one to the layers panel. Now we have one layer. I'm just going to resize. And the second one. So now we have two layers. I'm going to click on the gray area of the layers panel to deselect. We want to make sure that nothing is selected before we do the next step, which is to draw a line. So from the toolbar up top, you have several tools. Look for the pen tool. Just click on it once. Okay, and then I'm going to draw the first point right at the edge of the first icon, and then the next point right at the edge of the next icon. Okay, I just want to make sure that it's straight like so. And I can adjust this. Middle mouse button to pan around. Mouse wheel to zoom in. Pan around using the middle mouse. You can also use the spacebar to pan. Scroll wheel to zoom in and out. Okay, so we have the pen tool. I'm going to go back to the selection tool. Now we're ready to modify this line. We want to animate this line as if we are doing some file transfer. So select the line. The best practice is to make your selection. Although you can select objects on the composition itself. But sometimes when the composition becomes crowded, it's very difficult to select the correct layers. So it's better if you use the layers panel to select things. So we want to select the shape layer 1. This contains our line. I want to open the contents of this layer by clicking on this icon. Okay, and then contents, shape 1 will be our line. Open that. Open stroke 1, and here you will find this option, dashes. So we want to turn this line into a dashed line. So click on the plus sign before this option. Now we have dashes. So we want a simple animation like this. As you can see, I'm just changing the value of this property called offset. So this is the property that we're going to animate. I'm going to hit undo. So offset by default is set to 0. Make sure that your timeline is currently at frame 0. Okay. You can also use the time code. Just type in 0, press enter. We are going to create a keyframe for the offset property by clicking on the stopwatch icon before it. As you can see, there's a diamond icon at frame 0 of the offset property. That means that we have a keyframe. So we want the animation to be 15 frames long. So you can click and drag the time indicator, this blue guitar pick, and look for frame 15, or you can use the time code. Okay, so the time code has 1, 2, 3, 4 groups of digits separated by colons. The first group of zeros at the rightmost refers to frames. So we have 25 frames per second. If I type in 24, we are at frame 24. If I type 25, then that will be equivalent to 1 second. Therefore, it's going to give us 1 second. So frames, seconds, minutes, and hours. So our timeline is only 5 seconds long. So these groups of zeros are irrelevant at the moment. So let's go to frame 15. I'm going to type in 15 on the timecode and press enter. It's going to get us exactly at frame 15. And here we want to change the value of the offset property to a negative value, like 100. I can also click on the value and type the exact value, negative 100, press enter. Now if I go back in time and hit the spacebar to play, you can see that we have an animation going on. I want to make this faster, so I'm going to go back to the second keyframe, frame 15. Okay, make sure you are at the keyframe, or else it's going to create a new keyframe. We don't want that. We only want 2 keyframes, this one and this one. So every time we want to make changes, we want to be at either one of these keyframes. I want to change the value of the second keyframe to something higher, negative 150. Let's try that. We want a faster animation. So I think this would work just fine. We just want 15 seconds of animation. So in the timeline, you have this bar just below the timeline ruler. This is the work area. So I'm going to click and drag the end of this work area at frame 15. Okay, and then I'm going to right click the work area and choose trim comp to work area. What's going to happen is it's going to remove the unused work area here because we are only going to use 15 frames. So right click and trim to comp area. Now we just have 15 frames in the timeline. Let's hit play. I want to make the icons smaller, so I'm going to select them and make them smaller. Okay, let's preview. Now it's time to export. I'm going to show you 2 methods of exporting. We have this timeline, we have comp1 open. To export, you go to File, Export, Add to Render Queue. So as you can see, the layers panel is gone because now we have this Render Queue tab open. We can always go back to the layers panel by clicking on the composition name. Go to the Render Queue panel and let's talk about the settings. Output to will determine where your output will be saved in. I'm going to click that and select Desktop. Hit Save. Output module, let's click on that. Instead of AVI, I'm going to select QuickTime, okay, and press OK. I'm going to hit Render. Okay, so the render is done. We have this file. And the problem with this file is it has a black background. So if we are to use this on our movies, let's say we want to overlay our animation to a clip like this. And now if I try to overlay this animation, it's going to animate, but it's got that. So let's go back to After Effects and redo the process. I'm going to delete this, go back to your composition, click File, Export, Add to Render Queue. Okay, you should have Comp1 in the Render Queue. Let's click on the Output module. Instead of AVI, I'm going to choose QuickTime. Under Video Output, we have RGB. That means our animation will have colors. I'm going to change this to RGB plus alpha. Alpha means that the black background will become transparent. RGB plus alpha. Let's hit OK. Hit Render. Okay, let's go back to Premiere. Okay, so we have our composition here. I'm gonna adjust it. So now it's got transparency. You can see that. Let's make it smaller. Scale it down. Okay, so that's how you create a simple animation and export it with transparency.